Hey and welcome to my YouTube channel, and in this video I'm going to show you how to do this cool array looping animation by using geometry nodes in Blender. I'm using Blender 4.3 on a MacBook Pro with M1 chip and 16 RAM. So first start with set up the blend file. So before we start this tutorial, I want to say that here in the corner you can see all my shortcuts if you get lost or just want to know what I do. So let's get off the default stuff by pressing A to select all and then pressing X to delete it. So if you want to use this cosmetic tube, you can now download it for free on my Gumroad. So I will show you how to download the 3D model. So click on the link down below and then click 0 as the price and download that. And now I will show you how to import the model into your blend file. So go to the file and then click on append and then find your downloaded file and then click on object and then click on the cosmetic tube model and then click on append to import it to the blend file. So now let's go to the geometry nodes tab. So click on New and then rename it to Array Looping. And then press Shift A to add a node and then search for the point node. And then place it right over here. And then plug the points into the output node. And don't worry, we are going to use the input node later on. And this count will be the number of how many objects you will add to the animation. And now add an instance on points node and place it here. And then connect the group input into the instance. And by the way, the group input is your object for the animation. And then add a set position node and place it right here. And then change the Z on the set position node to a 5. And now we want the object to be separate with the same distance all around, like in the result video. So how are we going to do that? First, add a combine XYZ node and plug the vector into the rotation, and then take the Y and drag it out and search for the index node. And like you see, nothing happens. And that is because we haven't added any more object yet. So change the number to 10. And like you see, the distance between these tubes, it's not the same. So what we have to do is adding a math node and place it between those two nodes and then change the tab to multiply. So drag the value dot out and then add another math node and then change it to divide. So change the first value and type in 2, multiply by pi, and you will get the number 6.283. But the problem we have now is that nothing happens. Besides that, all of our tubes is on the same position. So how are we going to fix that? So take the count dot and drag it out, and then search for group input. And now you will see in your properties tab that a thing has been added there. Yes, our count value. So now take that count dot and drag it into the second value on the divide math node. And now you will see we have a perfect distance between all of our tubes. So now if we want to add more objects to our animation, they will always have the same distance all around from the start to the end. So now select the math node with the multiply and then press Shift plus D to duplicate it and place it between these two nodes. And now change that math node to radians instead of multiply. And now it looks kind of weird again. So before we are going to fix that, add another combine XYZ node and plug the vector into the offset on the set position. And then drag the Z dot and search for group input. And now, when you look at your properties, you will now see that your Z axis has added there. So change that Z back to a 5 again. And then go to the math node with divide, and now take the value dot and drag it out and search for group input. And now, when you look at your properties, you will now see that your value has added there, and this is where you animate the whole thing. And now, I will show you how to set up your nodes, so it's easier to see what everything is. So select your object node and press Ctrl plus J to join it to a new frame. And then press N to show this sidebar. And then go to Node and rename it to your object. And then select the divide math node and press Ctrl plus J to join it to a new frame and then rename it to Animate. And then take this group input node and place it into the frame we just created. And now press Shift A to add a reroute and place it right here. And now I'm going to speed up this process, and why I'm doing this, because it's going to look better and be easier to navigate our nodes. And here's me just making things look nice and clean. So select the group input and then press Ctrl plus J to join it to a new frame and then rename it to output just because we can. And now we want to change the names here on the properties, so press N to show the sidebar again. And then go back to the group and then drag down here so we can see all the inputs we have created. And then rename the count to object count by double-click on it and then rename the Z to move on the Z axis. And last, rename the value to animate. And here you go. So now let's animate our tube. So first go to frame 1 and change the animate on the properties to 0. And then hold your mouse over here and press I to insert a keyframe. And this orange thing is a keyframe. and then go to frame 30 and change the animate to 360. So we are rotating the tubes 360 degrees, and then press I to insert a keyframe. And before we are playing the animation, change the end frame to 45. And when we hit the spacebar to play the animation, we can now see that we have a cool array looping animation. And like you see in the result video, there is a little tilt before the rotation and a zoom in the end of the clip. So how are we going to do that? So let's set up the camera. So, if you are not in the front view, press 1 on your numpad to go to the front view. And if you don't have any numpad, don't worry, I'm going to show you how to enable the numpad for laptops. So press Command plus the coma key to go to the Blender preferences, and then click on Input, and then check the Emulate numpad. And then press Shift-A to add in camera, and then press G plus Y plus -70 to move it back on the Y-axis. And then press 0 on your numpad to go to the camera view. And then go to the camera settings and change the focal length to 85mm. And then unfold the viewport display and change the Passepartout to 0.8, so we have little bit of the viewport showing. And then unfold the composition guides and check the thirds and center for some guidelines. And now let's animate the camera. So first go to frame 1 and then press K to make a keyframe and click on location and rotation. And then go to frame 9 and press R plus Y plus -7.6 to rotate it, and then press K to make another keyframe, and then go to frame 37 and press G plus Y plus 32 to move the camera forward, and then press K to make another keyframe. And then last, go to frame 45 and press G plus Y plus 20.4 to move the camera forward a little bit more, and then press R plus Y plus 10.8 to rotate it. And last but not least, press K again to make another keyframe. And now when we hit the spacebar, we can see our cool and beautiful animation that we just created. Great job, everybody! So let's move to the next step and make the camera focus. So press Shift-A to add an empty and select the plane axis, and now press F2 to rename it. And for Mac users like me, press Fn plus F2 to rename it to camera focus. And then go to camera settings again, and unfold the depth of field, and then check the depth of field. And then change the focus on object to the camera focus. And then last, change the f-stop to 1. So press Z to switch between the different shades and select the render. And you will now see that your render view is very dark and grey. So I'm rendering in cycles, but if you want to render in EV, you can skip this part. So now let's set up the render settings. So first change the render engine to cycles. And if you have a GPU, go and change to that for a better rendering. And then change the noise threshold to 0.1 so you can render faster. And I like to render my videos with 300 as max samples, but you can go higher or lower if you want, depending on your computer. And then unfold the color management, and I like to leave the view transform on AGX and then change the look to high contrast. And also, for this animation, I turn on the motion blur for some cooler effects, but that is optional. So now let's set up the HDRI. So go to World, and then click on this yellow dot and select the environment texture, and like you see, the viewport turn into a pink and purplish color. But we don't want that, so to fix that, click on Open and choose your HDRI. And in the description, I link the HDRI I use, so go and download that. And like you see now, we have set up the HDRI image. So let's move to the next part. So now let's make a scene. So press Shift-A to add a plane, and then press RX90 to rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis, and then press G plus Y plus 10 to move it back a little bit. And now press the Tab button to go to Edit mode. And this is the Tab button right over the caps lock. And then press S plus 16 to scale it up, and then tab back to Object mode and rename it to Backdrop. And then press Z to switch to the Render mode. And then press Ctrl plus B to box select, and then drag over our camera view. So that is the only thing we render when we are going to do that. And now we are going to make a few changes. First, change the Move on the Z-axis in the Modifier tab to a 3.7, and then select the camera, and then press N to show the sidebar, and then go to frame 1 and change the Y to -60, and then press I over the location to change the keyframe. And now go to frame 9 and change the Y to -60, and then press I over the location to change the keyframe, and then last go to frame 45 and change the Y to -11.7, and then press I over the location to change the keyframe. And when we are playing the animation, you will see that we just move things closer to each other, but also zoom in the camera just a little bit. And we just did that because I think it looked nicer. So now let's move to the fun stuff and make the light setup. So before we start, I just wanted to say I changed the color of the tube, so it's going to be easier to see the effect of the lights. So press Shift-A to add an area light, and then press G plus Z plus 10 to move the light up on the Z-axis, and then press S plus 5 to scale it up. And now, on the light settings, change the power to 400 watts, and then rename it to Top Light. And then press M to create a collection and rename it to Lights. And then add another area light and press R plus 90 to rotate it. And then press 7 on your numpad to go to the top view. And then press R plus minus 115 to rotate it, and then press G plus Y plus 5.6 to move it on the Y-axis. And then press G plus X plus minus 4 to move it on the X-axis. And then go to the front view and press S plus 6 to scale it up. And on the light settings, change the power to 800 watts. And then rename it to Backlight. So let's add another area light and then press R plus 90 to rotate, and then go to the top view again. And then press R plus minus 7.6 to rotate it, and then press G plus Y plus 0.9 to move it, and then G plus X plus 6.2 to move it on the X-axis. And then go to the front view and press S plus 6 to scale it up. And on the light settings, change the power to 300 watts and then rename it to Fill Light. So let's add another area light, and then press R plus 90 as the others, and then go to the top view and press R plus minus 59 to rotate it, and then press G plus Y plus 4.8 to move it on the Y-axis, and then press G plus X plus 2.7 to move it on the X-axis, and then go back to the front view, and then press S plus 5 to scale it up. And here on the light settings, change the power to 600 watts, and then click on Use Nodes. And now click on the yellow dot and change to black body. So the black body is the temperature of the light. So this means we can control if we want the light warm or cold. So the lower the number is, the warmer will the light be, and the higher the number is, the colder will the light be. And now change the temperature to 2500 Kelvin, and now rename it to Backlight 2. So let's add the last area light and then press R plus 90 to rotate it, and then go to the top view and press R plus 121 to rotate it, and then press G plus Y plus minus 5.5 to move it on the Y-axis. And then press G plus X plus minus 2.5 to move it on the X-axis, and now go to the front view and press S plus 5 to scale it up. And now on the light settings, change the power to 200 watts and then rename it to Key Light. The last thing we are going to do for the lighting part is go to the world and then change the strength to 0.7. And now we can see in our viewport that the world is not that bright anymore. So now let's move to the next part and do the compositing things. So go to the Composting tab and then click here on Use Nodes, and then go to View Layer and check the denoising data. And then back to the Compositing window, add a denoising node and place it here. And then connect all the dots I do here on the screen. And like you see here in the result video, there are a little glow from the lights on the tube. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. But all part is of course optional. So add a glare node and then place it here, and then change from streaks to fog glow. And then here on the threshold, change that to 0.85 and leave the rest as it is. And now let's do the last thing for this tutorial and do the output stuff. So I like to render my videos in 4K. So the resolution for that is 3840 by 2160. But if you want to render in the default mode, that is good too. And then change the frame rate to 30 FPS, and that stands for frame per second. And I like to render in FMPEG video format, but you can choose to do PNG if that suits your computer better. And now unfold the encoding and change the container to MPEG-4, and then change the output quality to high quality, and then last click here on Render Animation. And are you ready for the result? And here is my result. Thank you for watching. And if you do a video with the help of this tutorial, go and upload that on Instagram and tag me at malin.mpeg4. And feel free to subscribe for more tutorials and videos.